The Arizona sun burned low and cruel across the wide red plains, spilling light over the bones of the earth and the scattered remnants of men's ambitions. The air shimmered with heat, the wind tasting of dust and sage. Every creature that lived beneath that sky, the hawk, the rattlesnake, the weary Mustang, knew what it meant to endure, and so did Ella McGraw. She sat tall in the saddle of her bay mare, her eyes narrowed against the glare. The brim of her hat cast a shadow across her face, but it couldn't hide the stubborn lift of her chin or the quiet determination in her gaze. She had been riding since dawn, following the faint trail that led across the desert toward Apache lands, a place white settlers spoke of in hushed tones, with warnings whispered over whiskey and firelight. But Ella had stopped listening to warnings a long time ago. The ranch back in Tucson lay quiet now, her father dead from fever, her husband killed in the cavalry raid 2 years past. The army had promised her safety, had promised order and justice, but all it had brought her was grief. And now, when her younger brother Samuel had gone missing, last seen chasing stolen horses across the San Pedro River, those same men had told her to leave it be. He's gone. Ella, the captain had said, his eyes hard as his polished buttons, the Apaches don't give back what they take. But Ella had never been one to take orders, not from soldiers, not from men, and certainly not from fear. So, she saddled her horse, packed a canteen, and rode out alone into the desert that men called death. By midday, the air seemed to vibrate with silence. Even the wind had gone still, as if watching her trespass. The land ahead shimmered with heat mirages, shapes that looked like ghosts of riders long dead. She felt eyes on her before she saw anyone. Then came the whistle of an arrow. Not close, but close enough to warn. Ella drew her horse to a stop, her heart hammering. Out from the red rock and mesquite, a half-dozen Apache warriors emerged like spirits born from the land itself, painted, silent, their bows drawn. They moved with the grace of predators, their faces calm, their eyes fixed on her every breath. Ella slowly raised her hands, palms open. "I come in peace," she called in a steady voice. "I only want to speak with your chief." The lead warrior, a man with scars on his cheek and a necklace of bone beads, studied her for a long moment before barking an order. The others closed in, surrounding her like the tightening coil of a snake. One of them disarmed her. Another took the reins of her horse. They spoke in Apache among themselves, sharp, clipped words she couldn't understand. Then they began to move, guiding her deeper into the canyon, where red stone rose like cathedral walls on either side. They rode for what felt like hours, until the canyon opened into a wide valley dotted with wickiups and smoke from cooking fires. It was the heart of the Apache camp, and every pair of eyes turned to watch the stranger on horseback. Children paused mid-play. Women carrying baskets froze. Warriors stared with suspicion, and at the center of it all stood Dakota. He was taller than the rest, broad-shouldered, his skin bronzed by sun and war, his hair tied back with a strip of leather. A scar cut across his collarbone, half hidden by a necklace of carved turquoise. His gaze was dark, deep, and impossibly steady, the kind of look that didn't just see a person, but measured them. When Ella was brought before him, she felt that gaze pierce straight through her, not cruelly, not even with anger, but with a gravity that made her pulse stumble. The warrior who led her forward spoke rapidly in Apache, gesturing toward her rifle and saddlebag. Dakota listened without expression, then looked at her again. "You cross my land," he said at last, his voice deep, accented but clear. "Why?" Ella's throat was dry from dust and fear, but her pride kept her back straight. "My brother," she said. "He was taken. I came to find him." Dakota's expression didn't change. "Many come looking. Few return. I don't plan on leaving without him," she said, her voice steady as a drawn bowstring. The faintest spark lit in his eyes. Not quite amusement, not quite respect. "You are brave, or foolish. Maybe both." Murmurs rippled through the watching crowd. No one spoke to the chief that way, not even his own warriors. But Ella wasn't raised to tremble before men. Dakota studied her for another long moment before turning to his men. "Take her horse. Give her water. She stays until I decide." She wanted to protest, to demand answers about Samuel, but something in his tone silenced her. This was a man who commanded not by force but by presence, Even the air seemed to listen when he spoke. They gave her a small tent near the edge of the camp, guarded day and night. The first evening, as the sun dipped low and the desert cooled to blue, Ella sat outside watching the fires flicker to life. The smell of roasted corn and smoke drifted on the wind. Laughter echoed from the circle where the warriors sat. She felt both close and infinitely distant from it all, an outsider in a world she had been taught to fear. Yet there was no savagery in what she saw, only order, tradition, family. That night, Dakota came to her. "You are far from home," he said, standing with arms crossed, the firelight casting gold on his face. "I've been far from home for a long time," she answered quietly. He regarded her for a while, then asked, "Why do you risk death for one man?" "Because he's my brother," she said, meeting his gaze. "And because no one else would." Something flickered in his eyes then, a memory perhaps, or pain. "Many who fight alone die alone," he murmured. "Then I'll die standing." Dakota's lips curved, barely perceptible. "You speak with a warrior's heart." He turned to leave, but before he did, she asked, "What will you do with me?" He paused, the fire popped between them. "You will stay," he said finally, "until I see who you truly are." When he was gone, Ella stared into the flames long into the night. She thought of Samuel, of his laugh, his reckless ways, and prayed he was alive somewhere close. But beneath her fear, another thought stirred, one she didn't want to name. There was something about the Apache chief that unsettled her, something magnetic and wild, like the storm before the rain. He was her enemy, and yet she couldn't shake the way his gaze had felt on her, steady and burning as though he had already begun to chain her heart without a single touch. And though she didn't know it yet, this was the beginning, the first step down a path that would bind their souls together forever, across blood, across battle, across the vast, unforgiving desert itself, because in the Arizona dusk, where the sky bled red and gold and the world held its breath, Ella McGraw defied the Apache chief's orders, and fate began to weave its own design around them both. Morning came with the smell of smoke and pine. The desert softened by a thin mist rising from the valley. The Apache camp stirred with quiet rhythm, women tending fires, children fetching water, warriors sharpening knives beneath the first light of dawn. And in the midst of it all, Ella McGraw sat by her tent, her wrists unbound but her freedom still an illusion. She had spent 2 uneasy nights in the camp, watched by curious eyes that saw her as something between a threat and a ghost. The Apache chief, Dakota, had said little since her capture. Yet somehow she felt his presence everywhere, in the discipline of his people, in the way order held even among wildness. She told herself she was here only for her brother, but each time she caught sight of him, tall and silent among his warriors, she felt the ground shift beneath her heart. Still, she kept her purpose like steel. That morning, she saw him speaking with an older woman whose face was marked by time and wisdom. The woman glanced her way, then approached with a bowl of herbs and a small smile. "Eat," the woman said softly in broken English. "You need strength." Ella accepted the bowl, murmuring her thanks. "Do you know if the chief—" The woman lifted a hand. "Dakota decides. You wait. Wait." That was all she had done for days. Wait and wonder if Samuel was even alive. By the third day, Dakota came to her again. He stood outside her tent as the wind rustled through the cottonwoods, his face unreadable as ever. "You ask for your brother," he said. "The council speaks tonight. They will decide." She rose to face him, her chin lifted. "And if they decide he dies?" His gaze didn't waver. "Then he will join the ancestors. The law is the law, and what of mercy?" she demanded. "Does your law have none?" For a heartbeat, silence lay heavy between them. Then Dakota's voice dropped lower. "Mercy is not a word white men brought us. Not say." She didn't understand the word he used, but the way it sounded, half like a rebuke, half like a name, stirred something strange inside her. "I'm not like them," she said quietly. "I didn't come here to take or kill. I came to bring my brother home." He studied her for a long moment. "We will see what kind of woman you are." That evening, she was led to the center of the camp where a great fire burned and the people gathered in a circle. The air shimmered with drum beats and chanting, rhythmic, powerful, echoing through the canyon walls. It was unlike anything she'd ever witnessed. At the fire's edge, Samuel knelt, bruised but alive. Relief flooded through her like water through cracked earth. "Sam," she cried. but a warrior blocked her path with the butt of his spear. Dakota raised his hand and silence fell. He spoke in Apache, his words carrying weight and music Ella couldn't understand. She could only read his face, solemn, proud, unwavering. When he finished, the council murmured among themselves, the elders nodding and shaking their heads in turn. Then the oldest among them spoke a few words that ended the debate. Dakota turned to Ella. "Your brother crossed our land, stole our horses, and fired upon my men," he said evenly. "He should die." Ella's heart seized. "Please," but he continued, "you came. You faced me without fear. You asked for his life, not your own. So I will give him back once the rains come. Until then he stays." She exhaled a trembling breath. "Thank you." His eyes softened, just slightly. "Do not thank me. You are the one who bought his life. With your courage." In the weeks that followed, Ella remained in the camp, a reluctant guest. Her brother was kept in a nearby tent under guard, healing from his wounds and sulking over lost pride. She visited him each day, but he was bitter. "You shouldn't have come," Samuel muttered. "They'll never let us both go." "I couldn't let you die," she answered, brushing dust from his hair. "You're all I've got left." He turned away. "Then we're both as good as dead." Ella didn't reply. She could not tell him what she had begun to feel. That danger didn't just come from the Apache's arrows, but from something far more treacherous. The quiet way Dakota's gaze lingered on her when he thought she didn't see. One afternoon, a commotion rose from near the river. A child had fallen into the water, swept by the current after chasing a wooden toy downstream. Shouts echoed, women screamed, and before anyone could move, Ella dropped the basket she was carrying and ran. She tore off her boots, waded into the cold torrent, and grabbed the boy just as the current pulled him under. The water was strong, the rocks sharp beneath her feet, but she fought it, clutching the small body against her chest and gasping as she made it to shore. The camp gathered in stunned silence as she knelt, dripping and breathless, the child coughing in her arms. She tore open her satchel, pulling out a small vial of frontier medicine, camphor oil and salve, and rubbed it against the boy's chest, coaxing him to breathe. Dakota arrived moments later, his face a thundercloud. "What are you doing?" "Saving his life," she snapped, still working over the child. He dropped to one knee beside her, eyes burning with equal parts fury and fear. "You disobeyed my order not to leave the camp." "I disobeyed death." The boy coughed weakly, then began to cry. Relief washed over the crowd, and murmurs spread like fire through dry grass. The chief looked at her, his anger dying as quickly as it had flared. "You risked your life," he said quietly. "For one not your own," she met his eyes. "Because life is precious and Apache or white. Does your law not see that?" He didn't answer right away. Then slowly he said, "My law has eyes. Tonight it sees you differently." From that day on, something shifted between them. Dakota began to visit her more often, sometimes to speak of the world beyond the mountains, sometimes of his people's struggles, and sometimes of nothing at all. They would sit near the evening fire, the wind whispering through the pines. He told her the Apache word for moon ta, and she told him the meaning of her name, light. "You bring light where there is shadow," he said once, his voice low. "But sometimes light can burn, and shadow can hide truth," she replied. Their eyes held across the fire. Neither spoke of what was forming between them. But it was there, as real as the desert wind, as dangerous as the line between peace and war. As the moon rose high and the stars painted the canyon silver, Ella lay awake in her tent. She could hear the drums still echoing faintly from the council fire, the murmurs of a people who had begun to look at her not as an intruder, but as something strange and new, and somewhere, beyond the firelight, she knew Dakota was awake too. She could almost feel his gaze, steady, watchful, and bound to hers in ways neither dared name. She had come for her brother, but found herself a prisoner of something else entirely. The pull of a man whose strength was born not of cruelty, but of quiet honor. She had defied his orders, challenged his rule, risked her life in his world, and yet, though she did not yet understand it, his gaze had already chained her heart forever. The monsoon clouds gathered like bruises across the horizon, dark and swollen with rain. The air hung heavy with the scent of wet earth and mesquite. It had been nearly 2 months since Ella McGraw first rode into Apache lands, and in that time, everything she had known about life, loyalty, and love had begun to shift like sand underfoot. The camp had accepted her presence now, not fully, but enough that the stairs no longer burned with suspicion. The children no longer hid when she passed. The women sometimes offered her woven bread or water with shy nods, and every evening she found herself looking toward the far ridge, waiting for Dakota to appear, the chief whose gaze had first burned her with fear and now filled her with something far more dangerous. He had a way of moving that seemed part of the land itself. Silent, sure, like the mountain shadow stretching long across the valley. When he looked at her, it wasn't the look of a captor toward his prisoner. It was a man trying to understand something beyond reason, a fire that words could not contain. Yet Ella knew such a peace could not last. The world beyond the canyon had not forgotten her. One evening, as the sun bled red over the cliffs, Dakota came to her tent. His expression was hard, his eyes clouded. "The soldiers have crossed the San Pedro River," he said. "They come for you." Ella froze. "The army?" He nodded. "Your people believe you are held captive. They bring guns and fire." Her stomach dropped. "Oh God, they'll start a war." His jaw tightened. "War is already here. They think we took you. They think we harm you. I told them no white woman is prisoner here, but they will not believe. I have to go to them," she said suddenly. "I can explain." "If I can talk to the captain," he cut her off sharply. "No. Dakota, please." He stepped closer, the tension between them thick as storm heat. "You would go to them? You would leave now and bring their fire on us? You would betray the lives I swore to protect?" Her breath caught. "I would stop the killing. You cannot stop men who do not listen." She swallowed hard, her heart pounding. "Then I'll make them listen." The silence that followed was sharper than a blade. Dakota's voice dropped low. "If you go, I cannot protect you. Or my people." "I didn't ask for protection," she said, meeting his gaze. "I asked for peace." For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind moaned through the canyon, carrying the smell of coming rain. Finally, Dakota turned away. "You speak as though peace is a choice. It is not." And with that, he walked into the gathering dusk, leaving her standing there, torn between the two worlds that had claimed her heart. That night, Ella couldn't sleep. The first drops of rain began to fall, slow and heavy. She watched the flicker of lightning crawl over the mountains and felt the storm building inside her chest. She thought of her brother, still weak, still bitter, and of the soldiers who would march into this land with torches and rifles. Blind to the truth, if she did nothing, blood would spill, and she would bear that guilt forever. So she packed what little she had, her old rifle, a strip of bread, her canteen, and slipped into the night. She moved quietly through the camp, her skirts brushing the wet grass. The guards were sheltering from the rain, and she passed unseen, her heart hammering with each step. The canyon mouth loomed ahead, a narrow cut in the rock that opened toward the lowlands, toward home. She thought she was free, but a shadow moved ahead, a silhouette tall and still as the storm-washed stone. "Dakota, where do you go?" he asked, voice roughened by the rain. "Let me pass," she said, clutching the reins of her horse. He didn't move. "You defy me again." "I defy death," she shot back. "If I can stop them, I have to try." "Try what?" "To save them from their own hatred, to save me from what I am." His voice cracked like thunder. "You do not understand. They will not listen to a woman. Not even you." "Then they'll listen to my heart," she said, rain running down her face like tears. "And if I die trying, so be it. But I will not stand by while more blood is shed." The storm broke above them, a roar of water and lightning. For a long, pulsing moment they stood inches apart, two souls bound by something neither could name, both too proud to yield. Then Dakota reached out suddenly, gripping her arm. His touch burned even through the rain. "You walk into death, Nadase," he said softly, "and I will not lose you to their guns." She looked up at him, defiant even as her heart trembled. "You don't own me." "No," he said, his voice breaking. "But my heart does." For a heartbeat, the storm seemed to fade, and then his hand dropped away. "Go then," he said. "But if you betray my people, if one child dies because of this, I will never forgive you." She mounted her horse without a word and rode into the darkness. She reached the lowland ridge by dawn. The army's camp lay in the valley below, lines of canvas tents, smoke curling from cook fires, soldiers bustling under the dim light of a gray sky. The moment she appeared, rifles were raised. "Hold fire," a voice shouted. Captain Lyle, the same officer who'd once told her to leave it be. He stepped forward, shock flashing in his eyes. "Ella McGraw? Good God, woman, you're alive. I need to speak with you," she said urgently, dismounting. "You can't attack them." "They haven't harmed me," he frowned. "You expect me to believe that? You've been gone 2 months living among savages." "They're not savages," she said fiercely. "They're people. They have laws, honor." He cut her off with a wave of his hand. "They took your brother and they'll pay for it. The order's already given. Then you'll slaughter women and children." He gave a bitter laugh. "That's war, ma'am." Her voice rose, desperate now. "I am telling you, it doesn't have to be." But he turned away. "You've been gone too long, Ella. Maybe you've forgotten which side you're on." And in that moment she understood. It didn't matter what she said. His heart was stone, his pride deaf. She was too late. When the first gunfire echoed through the canyon, Ella felt the sound like a knife. She grabbed a rifle and ran toward the smoke. Men shouted, horses screamed, and fire rolled down the slope like a living thing. The Apache camp fought fiercely, but were outnumbered. She saw women fleeing with their children, warriors falling one by one, and through the chaos she caught sight of Dakota, leading his people toward the hills. His face streaked with blood and rain. He turned, saw her among the smoke, and for a heartbeat, everything else disappeared. She raised her hand, crying out above the thunder, "I tried to stop them!" He didn't answer, only reached for her, his eyes blazing with pain and something deeper. "You should not have come back. I couldn't let them." "Enough," he said, voice breaking. "You've done all you can. Now live." Together they led the last of the villagers to safety, through the narrow canyon and into the high country. When the echoes of battle faded, the valley below lay smoking, a wound carved into the land. That night, in a cave above the fire-scorched plain, Ella sat beside Dakota in silence. His arm was cut, his face shadowed with exhaustion. "I thought I could save them," she whispered. "I thought words would be enough." He looked at her with eyes dark as storm clouds. "Your heart is brave," he said quietly. "But the world does not yet deserve hearts like yours." She turned toward him, her voice trembling. "Do you hate me now?" He shook his head. "No, you fight for peace even when peace burns you."
"How could I hate that?"
The fire crackled between them. Rain still whispered outside. And though the world had turned to ash, Ella felt his hand reach for hers, made strong, rough, and trembling. 2 enemies, 2 lovers born of war, and though the storm had broken them, it had also bound them, soul to soul, scar to scar. Because even in betrayal, love had survived. And Dakota's gaze, the same gaze that had once judged her, now held her as surely as chains of gold. The world was quiet after the fire. Days passed beneath a sullen sky, where smoke drifted from the burned valley below and the air smelled of ash and sorrow. The army had retreated after the raid, taking their dead and leaving behind a silence more haunting than any battle cry. High in the mountains, in a hidden canyon veiled with pine and mist, the surviving Apaches rebuilt. It was there that Ella McGraw stayed, not by command but by choice. Her clothes were torn, her hands blistered from helping raise new shelters, yet she never complained. The people who had once looked at her with suspicion now greeted her with weary nods of gratitude. She was no longer the enemy. She was something between guest and ghost, a woman caught between 2 worlds. And in that quiet exile, Dakota watched her. The chief had not spoken much since the attack. The fire that once lived in his voice was now muted, turned inward. He bore his wounds in silence as his people did, yet his eyes followed Ella wherever she went, as though she were a flame flickering in a place that had known too much darkness. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the canyon in gold, Ella found him alone beside the river. He stood knee-deep in the water, washing the blood from a spear that had seen too much killing. His hair hung loose, black as the water's reflection, his broad shoulders rigid with quiet pain. "You shouldn't be alone," she said softly. He didn't look up. "A chief is always alone." She stepped closer, feeling the cool spray of the river on her face. "You lost people you loved." "Yes," his voice was low. "Brothers, friends, my uncle, the old ones who remembered the time before war. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. Dakota finally looked at her, that deep, unreadable gaze locking with hers. You did not light the fire, he said, but it burns you all the same. He set the spear aside and climbed from the river. Drops of water ran down his chest, catching the light like glass. Your soldiers will call you traitor for what you've done, he said. You helped the enemy. You fought beside me. I don't care what they call me, she replied. I care about what's right. He studied her, eyes narrowing. And what is right, Ella McGraw? She hesitated. The wind stirred her hair, carrying the faint scent of rain. Right is what lets me look at myself in the mirror without shame. Dakota stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of his breath even through the cool air. Then you are a rare woman, he said, because shame does not live in your heart, only fire. For a long, trembling moment they stood there, two warriors shaped by loss, bound by something neither could explain. That night the tribe gathered to honor their dead. Fires burned low, and songs of mourning drifted into the starlit sky. Ella sat near the edge of the circle, wrapped in a blanket given by one of the women. She didn't understand the words of the song, but she felt their meaning, the ache of grief, the echo of survival. When the final drumbeat faded, Dakota rose. His voice carried across the camp. We live still, he said, in Apache first, then in English for her. The white man tried to take our land, our children, our spirit, but we live. And while we live, we will not forget. The people murmured in agreement. Then his gaze found Ella's across the fire. And we will not forget those who fought beside us even when they did not have to. She felt heat rise to her cheeks. Every face turned toward her, not in anger, but in acknowledgement. For the first time, she wasn't the stranger in their midst. She was part of their survival. After the gathering, she found Dakota standing beneath the stars, away from the fires. The moonlight silvered his features, softening the hard lines carved by loss. You spoke beautifully, she said. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. You changed the story of my people, Nadase. There's that word again, she said, smiling faintly. You never told me what it means. He hesitated. It means the one who brings light. Her heart caught. Then I hope I'm worthy of it. Dakota stepped closer, the sound of his breath mingling with the whisper of wind through the pines. When I was a boy, he said, my mother told me the Great Spirit gives each warrior two hearts, one of fire, one of shadow. The fire drives him to lead. The shadow keeps him from love. A chief must choose which to obey. Ella's voice trembled. And which do you obey, Dakota? His eyes burned into hers. Until now, the shadow. But you... He reached up, brushing a strand of wet hair from her cheek. You make the fire burn too bright to ignore. She felt the world tilt. The sound of the river, the rustle of the wind, the hum of her own heartbeat, all faded into a single pulsing stillness. Dakota. He drew her closer, his voice low, rough, barely more than a whisper. I told myself your heart was not mine to claim, but I see you in the water, in the wind, in every dawn. I see nothing else, her breath caught. You chained me with that look, Dakota. From the first day I saw you. He smiled faintly, a rare, unguarded smile. Then we are both prisoners. Their lips met, not in haste or passion, but in something deeper. It was a kiss born of pain and patience, of fire long restrained. It spoke of things no words could say. Forgiveness, longing, surrender. The night seemed to hold them, the stars like witnesses above. And when they finally broke apart, neither could look away. Later they sat by the dying fire, her head resting against his shoulder. What happens now? She asked softly. Dakota's gaze drifted toward the dark horizon. The army will come again. They will not forget their defeat. And when they do, he turned to her, his face calm but resolute. Then we fight, not for revenge, but for the right to live. She reached for his hand. Then I'll fight with you. His fingers tightened around hers. You cannot stay here forever. This is not your world, she smiled sadly. Maybe it's the only world that ever made sense. He looked at her long and hard, as if trying to memorize every line of her face. You are light, Ella McGraw, and light cannot live too long among shadows. She leaned closer. Then maybe I'll teach the shadows to love the light. He laughed softly, the first true laugh she'd heard from him since the raid. And in that sound, for the first time, there was hope. That night, as they lay beneath the blanket of stars, Dakota's arm around her, Ella felt the rhythm of his heartbeat, slow, steady, unyielding. The world beyond the canyon still hated what they were. The war between their peoples still raged like a wildfire waiting to be reborn. But here, in this hidden valley, she had found peace. Not the fragile peace of treaties and signatures, but the peace of truth. Because she had seen the chief's heart, not the warrior's mask or the leader's burden, but the man beneath. The one who loved without permission, and though danger waited beyond the dawn, she knew one thing with certainty. Whatever came next, her heart was already his. Bound not by law nor by tribe, but by the wild, unbreakable soul of the desert itself. The dawn came painted in red, the kind of red that warned of blood before the day was done. From the ridge above the canyon, Ella McGraw watched the horizon burn with sunrise, her heart heavy with what she already knew. The riders had been sighted at dusk the night before, U.S. cavalry marching hard through the foothills, their flags catching the last light like sparks of iron. They were coming for the Apache. And for her, she'd known it would happen. The army never forgot betrayal, especially from one of their own. In the quiet before the storm, Ella sat beside Dakota, who crouched by a dying campfire sharpening his knife. The edge gleamed cold in the morning light. His face was calm, too calm. That eerie stillness that only men who've accepted death seem to wear. "They'll be here by noon," she said softly. He nodded without looking up. "Then the sun will see blood before it sleeps." She looked out toward the east again. "You could still run, Dakota. There's a trail north through the Badlands. It would buy time." He finally turned to her, eyes dark and steady. "A chief does not run. If I leave, my people will scatter. If I stay, they will fight and die," she whispered. He slid the knife into its sheath. "Then they will die free." Ella's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to tell him there had to be another way. But she'd lived long enough on the frontier to know lies had no mercy here. Freedom, in this land, always demanded blood. Still, something inside her refused to surrender to fate. "Dakota," she said, stepping closer, her hand brushing his arm. "If you fight, you'll die here. But if we leave together, if we take the people into the mountains, maybe there's a chance." He studied her face for a long moment, then said quietly, "You would leave your world behind for me?" She smiled faintly, though her heart ached. "I left it the day I met you." For the first time since the soldiers had been sighted, Dakota's hard gaze softened. He reached for her hand, rough palms enclosing hers. "Then we ride." By the time the sun climbed high, the tribe was moving, a line of horses snaking through the narrow mountain pass. Children clung to their mothers. Old men rode in silence, wrapped in blankets. Ella rode near the front beside Dakota, her heart pounding in rhythm with the hooves. Below them, in the valley, the army appeared, a glittering serpent of blue and brass, sabers flashing like lightning. The soldiers fanned out across the plain, their bugles echoing through the canyon. "Go," Dakota shouted, raising his hand. "Ride for the high country." The Apaches broke into a gallop, dust rising in golden plumes. The sound was deafening. Hooves on stone, shouts in two languages, the thunder of rifles. The first bullet struck the rocks around them, sharp as hail. A horse screamed. A child cried out. Dakota wheeled his mount, firing from the saddle, his rifle cracking like thunder. Ella did the same, her heart hammering, her hands steady. Years of ranch life had taught her to shoot straight, but this was different. This was chaos, smoke, blood, and heartbreak all at once. "Faster," she cried to the riders behind her. "Don't stop." The trail narrowed, forcing them into a single line. Rocks tumbled down as horses stumbled, the path twisting like a snake between cliffs. Behind them, the soldiers gained ground. Dakota glanced back, face grim. "They'll trap us in the pass if we don't move faster." Ella pointed to a ridge ahead. "There's another trail through the pines." He nodded, veering his horse up the slope. They climbed hard, lungs burning, the world spinning in clouds of dust and gunfire. At the top, the view opened wide, endless mountains rolling away like waves frozen in stone. Dakota signaled for the others to keep going north. "Take them," he shouted to his second in command. "Lead them to the sacred hills." "What about you?" the warrior cried. Dakota's eyes met Ella's. "We stay." The warrior hesitated, then nodded once and rode off, the tribe following in a rush of hooves and wind. Ella turned to Dakota. "You mean to hold them off?" He smiled, a fierce, fearless smile. Long enough for them to live free? She shook her head, tears burning in her eyes. You'll be killed. He took her face in his hands, his touch tender even as battle raged below. There are worse deaths than dying for what you love. Her breath caught. Then let me die with you. No, he said softly. You must live, for both of us. Before she could protest, he kissed her. Hard, desperate, final. The kind of kiss that carved itself into memory like a brand. Then he turned and mounted his horse, raising his rifle. Go, Nadase, he said. The name he'd given her, the one who brings light. Find the mountains. Find the dawn. And before she could stop him, he rode. The soldiers reached the ridge moments later, their rifles flashing. Dakota charged straight into their line, fearless and terrible as a storm. His war cry split the air, echoing across the canyon. Ella screamed his name, firing from cover, cutting down 2 men before her rifle jammed. She watched helplessly as Dakota's horse fell as he rose again, fighting with his knife, his movements a blur of grace and fury. Bullets tore through smoke. The sound of gunfire rolled like thunder. Then, silence. When the dust cleared, Dakota stood alone for a heartbeat, silhouetted against the burning sky. He turned toward her. Their eyes met across the distance, and then he fell. Ella didn't remember running, didn't remember screaming. Only the feel of his blood on her hands when she reached him, the weight of his head against her lap. Don't, she whispered, pressing her hands to the wound in his chest. Don't you dare leave me, Dakota. His eyes fluttered open. He smiled faintly. The fire still burns, he breathed. Tears streamed down her face. Then let it burn in me. He tried to speak again, but the words never came. His hand slipped from hers, falling limp against the earth. The sun broke through the clouds then, flooding the ridge in light. Golden, warm, merciless. It lit his face like a blessing. Ella bent forward, her sobs swallowed by the wind. Around her, the last echoes of battle faded into silence. Days later, she buried him beneath a great cedar tree overlooking the canyon, his rifle laid across his chest, his horse's feather tied to a branch above. The army left her alone after that. Some said they pitied her. Others whispered she'd gone mad, but Ella didn't care. She stayed in the mountains, living among the surviving Apache, who had found refuge far beyond the reach of soldiers. In time, songs were sung of the white woman who fought beside the chief, who defied her own kind for love. And sometimes when the wind rose through the canyon, Ella swore she could hear him, Dakota's voice in the whisper of pine and stone. The fire still burns. She would smile then, lift her face to the wind and whisper back, always.